My parents demanded that I sell my house to pay off my sister's $350,000 debt, even though they cut me off from my family 5 years ago, repeating, "Family helps family." I refused. Then they broke into my house and destroyed everything, but they had no idea that this house was. My fingers could barely hold the keys as I turned the lock. The clock on my wrist showed 5:30 in the morning, and I still had the monitors with the patient's vital signs in front of my eyes. The 12-hour night shift in the intensive care unit had drained me of all my strength. The only thing I wanted was a hot bath and a few hours of sleep before my next shift. "Finally home," I muttered, pushing open the door and fumbling for the light switch. Light flooded the hallway, and I froze in my tracks. My heart skipped a beat, and then it pounded as if it was trying to break through my chest. My home, my cozy little house, was torn apart, mutilated, raped by someone else's anger. I took a step forward, and the glass crunched under my foot. The crystal vase that Aunt Eleanor had given me was now just a pile of shiny shards. The sofa was overturned, the cushions ripped open, feathers scattered all over the living room as if dozens of birds had fledged. The bookshelves were empty, and the books themselves, my favorites, collected over the years, were lying around with pages torn out. On the wall, right above the fireplace, was written in red paint, EGOISTIC. The letters were blurry, the paint hadn't even dried yet. My legs gave out. I sank to the floor, right in the middle of the wreckage of my life, and only then did I notice that I was crying. The tears were flowing silently. I wasn't even sobbing. I just couldn't believe in the reality of what I was seeing. Who could have done this? Robbers? But nothing of value had disappeared. The TV was still there. The laptop, too. It was not a robbery. It was punishment. I slowly got up and went on to the dining room. A broken porcelain set, chairs thrown to the floor, cutlery scattered as if after a hurricane. In the kitchen, there were spilled food, broken jars of spices, and smashed dishes. When I got to the bedroom, I was horrified. The mattress was cut open, the bed linen was torn, the drawers of the dresser were turned out. My clothes were lying on the floor, some of them had been cut with scissors. I bent down to pick up my favorite dress, given to me by the same Aunt Eleanor, and suddenly noticed something shiny among the shards of the broken mirror. A cufflink. A silver cufflink engraved with G.W. Harrison Winthrop. My father. A cold wave swept through my body from head to toe. I took the cufflink with trembling fingers, not believing my eyes. And then, glancing further, I saw a turquoise earring exactly like the ones I had given my sister Nora for her 25th birthday. The phone rang so suddenly that I flinched, dropping my findings. It was an unfamiliar number. "Laurel?" My mother's voice was icy and calm, as if we were discussing the weather, not the destruction of my house. "Mom? You did this? Who else, dear?" Her voice sounded almost gentle. "You didn't think you could just shrug off your family responsibilities so easily, did you?" Responsibilities? I could barely contain my hysteria. "For 5 years, I didn't exist for you, and now you break into my house and destroy everything?" "No, Nora is in trouble," her mother said. "$350,000 in debt is no joke. She's facing jail, Laurel, and this house belongs to me," I shouted. "Aunt Eleanor left it to me. Not you, not Nora, me." "Family helps family," my mother said coldly. "But it seems you're better off with the wreckage than with your own sister. This is your last chance, Laurel. Sell the house, or next time we'll go beyond the furniture." The call ended, and I stood there with the phone in my hand, unable to move. Family helping family was their favorite phrase, one they'd repeated over the years whenever Nora got into trouble. And every time it meant that I had to give up my savings, my time, my dreams to help my sister out. And when I couldn't do it anymore 5 years ago, when I said I wouldn't give back the money I had saved for her education, I was cut off from my family. They cut me off as if I had never been their daughter. And now they are back, and they threatened to destroy everything I cared about. I slid down the wall to the floor and sat there for what seemed like an hour, unable to cry, scream, or even think. My neighbor, Mrs. Beckett, started calling, but I didn't answer. Then I got a text from a colleague at work asking if I was okay. But how could I answer? How could I explain that my own family had destroyed my home? Finally, I forced myself to get up. I had to do something, at least call the police. I slowly began to collect the most valuable things that could still be saved. Every step was difficult, as if I was moving underwater. In the corner of my bedroom, I noticed an upside-down photo album, the only one I had kept after my breakup with my family. The pages were torn out, the photos were cut up, but the album frame was almost intact, the frame in which a little secret was hidden. My fingers felt a secret hole in the spine. A small copper key fell into my palm, just like the one Aunt Eleanor had shown me many years ago when she showed me her greatest treasure. I had never told my parents or sister about it. It was a secret between me and my aunt. I slowly walked over to the old carpet in the corner of the bedroom, pulled it back, and saw the almost invisible outline of a door in the floor. The key fit perfectly, just like it had all these years. I turned it, and a soft clicking sound was heard. My hands trembled as I lifted the door. In the dim light of the morning sun streaming through the window, a dark opening and a narrow staircase leading down revealed. A place my family did not know about. A place that Aunt Eleanor had protected from the world by bequeathing to me along with the house. I stepped onto the first step, plunging into the cool darkness. I was sitting on an old chair in a secret basement, holding a tattered photograph. It showed a smiling Aunt Eleanor hugging me, a 12-year-old, outside this very house. The light from the single lamp fell on our faces, and I remembered the day when my aunt first showed me this basement. "Your family is not always those who share your blood, Laurel," she said in her husky voice. "Sometimes family is those who share your soul." Now, sitting among the books and strange artifacts that my aunt had collected all her life, I realized how right she was. Relations in our family had never been warm. I was born 2 years later than my sister Nora, and from the very beginning, it was clear to everyone that she was my parents' favorite. Nora was prettier, livelier, more sociable. She knew how to draw attention to herself and get what she wanted. My first vivid childhood memory is Nora's birthday, when she turned 7. I remember a huge 3-story cake, dozens of gifts, and my parents looking at her with undisguised adoration. "Our little princess," said my father, the tall and stern Harrison Winthrop, a successful pharmacy chain owner. Rarely did his face soften, but next to Nora, it glowed with pride. "One day she will lead our family empire," added her mother, the always elegant Vivian Winthrop, who cared more about social status than about the feelings of her own children. At that party, I was given a book as a gift, so I wouldn't get bored. I hid in a corner with it, trying to be invisible. That's when Aunt Eleonora, my mother's older sister, a strange woman with gray hair in a messy bun and old-fashioned glasses, came up to me. "Books are portals to other worlds, Laurel," she said, sitting down next to me. "People who understand them are never alone." From that day on, we developed a special friendship. I loved visiting her house, an old Victorian mansion on the outskirts of town, filled with books, paintings, and strange objects that my aunt brought back from her many travels. She was a botanist and paleontologist, the only woman in her generation to earn a doctorate and travel halfway around the world. My parents called her a freak and a disgrace to the family, but I thought she was the most interesting person in the world. It was Aunt Eleanor who taught me to value knowledge, perseverance, and loyalty to my own principles. Nora, on the other hand, continued to be a family favorite even when her behavior became problematic. At 14, she was arrested for shoplifting cosmetics. At 16, she was arrested for drunken driving. Her parents always settled everything: money, connections, lawyers. And every time they repeated the same phrase, "Family helps family." I remember one evening when I was 17. Nora crashed her father's Mercedes on her way back from a party. She was not injured, but she damaged several other cars parked on the street. We'll fix it, said her father, sitting at the dining room table. We'll make arrangements with the car owners and the traffic police. No one will get hurt. Except for our bank account, I said quietly, and the room fell into an oppressive silence. What did you say? My father looked at me as if he had never seen me before. Nora is never responsible for her actions. I found the courage to continue. You always fix everything. How will she ever learn responsibility? Responsibility? My mother interjected. The responsibility of a family is to support each other. It's you, Laurel, who needs to learn responsibility to your family. Family helps family, her father repeated, as if it were a sacred mantra. One day you may get into trouble, and we will come to your aid as well. But I never got into trouble. I studied well, received a scholarship to medical school, and above all, I dreamed of becoming a doctor. I didn't need their help, just their support, and maybe a little pride in me, but I never got that. When I turned 22, Aunt Eleanor fell ill. She had pancreatic cancer, stage 4. I took care of her in the last months of her life, combining it with my studies and a part-time job in a coffee shop. Your parents decided long ago which of you deserves their love, my aunt said shortly before she died. But I chose you, Laurel. I see a strength in you that the other Winthrops don't have. When my aunt died, I was the only one who really grieved. My parents and Nora came to the funeral just for show, dressed in black, but without tears or real grief. A week later, we were all invited to the family lawyer's office to read the will. I bequeath my entire estate, including the house on Wisteria Lane, to my niece, Laurel Winthrop. The lawyer read out. The room fell dead silent. The father turned purple. The mother froze with her mouth half open. Nora, who had always expected to get the lion's share of the inheritance, just laughed in disbelief. There must be some mistake, her father finally said. Eleanor couldn't have. The will was properly drafted and certified according to all the rules, the lawyer replied. It is not subject to appeal. That day was the beginning of a real war. My parents tried to challenge the will, accusing me of manipulating and deceiving a sick woman. Nora spread gossip among relatives and family friends, but the will was flawless, and after 6 months of litigation, the house officially came into my possession. I moved in as soon as I received the documents. It was only then, when I was looking around the house that now belonged to me, that I discovered the secret basement and realized why my aunt wanted me to inherit her house so badly. And then came the day that changed everything for good. Nora got into trouble again. This time, she stole money from her then-boyfriend's account, a substantial sum that he had been saving for his master's degree. We need $100,000, my father said, inviting me to dinner at the family home. Nora could go to jail. Why don't you give her the money yourself? I asked. You are wealthy people. We've already spent a lot on her lawyers, my mother replied, and on expanding the business. Now all our assets are tied up. And you have money saved for her education, the father added. $100,000 is all you need to settle the situation. I sat there in disbelief. Money that I had been saving for years, working 2 jobs, to pay for my specialization in neurology, the dream of my life. I can't, I finally answered. This money is my future. I've been working for it for years. Family is more important than money, my mother said sternly. Family helps family, my father picked up his favorite phrase. Why do I always have to sacrifice something for Nora? I asked, feeling anger building in my chest. When was the last time any of you sacrificed anything for me? You're selfish, Laurel. Nora, who had been sitting silently in the corner, exclaimed. You always have been. You only think about yourself. Me? I almost choked on my indignation. It's you who always thinks only about yourself. You steal, lie, break the law, and then expect everyone to clean up after you. That's enough, my father shouted, slamming his fist on the table. We're not here to listen to your accusations. Either you give us the money or what? I looked him straight in the eye. Or you're no longer part of this family, my mother said coldly. I remember how I slowly got up from the table. I remember looking at each of them, my father with his face reddened with anger, my mother with her lips curled in contempt, Nora with her fake tears. Okay, I said quietly. I never felt like a part of this family in the first place. I walked out of the house I grew up in and never looked back. 5 years passed before I heard their voices again, when they called 3 days ago demanding that I sell Aunt Eleanor's house to pay off Nora's new debt, $350,000. This time she outdid herself. Credit fraud, forgery, and the threat of jail again. And again, family helping family. I told them no. And here is the result: my destroyed house and new threats. I took a deep breath and put the photo down. It was time to go back upstairs and call the police. But before I did, I looked around the basement once more. Bookshelves that stretched from floor to ceiling, ancient manuscripts under glass, rare editions, some of which existed in only a few copies in the world. A collection that Aunt Eleanor had spent her entire life amassing. A collection worth millions. I was the only one who knew about it. Aunt Eleanor was not just a botanist and paleontologist. She was a passionate bibliophile with impeccable taste and connections in the most remote corners of the world. Her collection contained rare first editions, signed copies, lost manuscripts. This collection belongs to the world, Laurel, she told me shortly before she died. But not everyone is worthy of being its guardian. I chose you. According to her will, the collection was to be transferred to the National Museum 10 years after her death, provided I could keep it intact during that time. It was her way of testing me, making sure I was worthy of her trust. For 5 years, I fulfilled her will. I maintained perfect conditions in the basement, cataloged books, consulted with experts without disclosing the full scope of the collection. 5 more years, and the collection would have become the property of humanity, and my name would have been forever associated with this gift. But now everything is in jeopardy. If my parents or Nora found out about the true value of this house, they would do everything they could to take it away. And I couldn't let them destroy the last thing left of Aunt Eleanor. I stood up, taking a small glass box from the nearest shelf. Inside was a yellowed sheet, the letter my aunt had left me. Laurel, my dear girl, she wrote. If you are reading this, it means that I have already left, and you have accepted my gift and my commission. Remember, the true value is not in what you have, but in what you save for others. I am entrusting you with my greatest treasure, not because you are my niece, but because your soul is capable of understanding its true value. Your family may betray you, the world may turn away, but knowledge and beauty cannot be destroyed as long as there is someone willing to stand guard over them. You are stronger than you know, Laurel, and one day the whole world will see what I have seen. I carefully folded the letter and returned it to the box. Aunt Eleanor believed in me. She chose me when no one else saw any value in me, and now I couldn't let her down. The police left around 11 in the morning. They took some photos, filled out a report, and promised to keep in touch. I could see by their faces that the case did not seem to be a priority for them. Are you sure you want to file a report against your relatives? The younger officer asked, looking at his watch. Maybe we should try to resolve everything peacefully first? I looked at him with a blank stare. Peacefully? After what they did? Yes, I'm sure, I replied firmly, and I want a restraining order. The officers looked at each other, but nodded. Then they expressed their condolences once again and left, leaving me alone in the ruins of my life. I made myself some tea, finding a surviving cup, and sat on the floor with my back against the wall. Now, in the daylight, the destruction looked even worse. My whole life was turned upside down, mangled, shattered. I remembered how it all started, 3 days ago, when they appeared on my doorstep. It was Tuesday, 5 o'clock in the evening. I had just returned from the hospital after my day shift and was about to take a bath when the doorbell rang. My heart sank when I saw them through the peephole. My father, mother, and Nora, standing on the porch with tense faces. 5 years. For 5 years, they hadn't spoken to me, hadn't responded to my holiday greetings, hadn't invited me to family gatherings, and now they just showed up at my doorstep as if nothing had happened. I opened the door without taking off my chain. "What do you want?" I asked coldly. "Laurel, dear." My mother tried to smile, but her smile was strained, unnatural. "We need to talk." "We haven't talked in 5 years," I reminded her. "Why now?" "Family business," my father said. "It's important." I hesitated. Something in their faces tense, with fake smiles, warned me of danger. But a part of me, the little girl who still wanted their approval, won. I took off the chain and stepped back, allowing them to enter. They looked around, assessing my house, their eyes gliding over the walls, the furniture, the paintings, as if they were evaluating a product in a store. "It's a nice house," my mother finally said. "Eleanor always had taste." "What do you want?" I repeated, crossing my arms over my chest. "Nora is in trouble," my father said without preamble, looking me straight in the eye. I turned my gaze to my sister. She was standing with her head down, but I noticed her expensive manicure, designer bag, and diamond earrings. "What is it this time?" I asked tiredly. "Credit fraud," my father answered. "Nora took out loans under other people's names. She used the information of some of her clients. Nora worked in a bank, in the credit department." "How much?" I already knew the answer, but I asked anyway. $350,000, my father said the amount as if it were small change, plus interest and penalties. "And you came to me because—" I didn't even try to hide my sarcasm. "Because family helps family," my mother interjected, taking a step towards me. "Nora is facing prison. Real time." "How am I supposed to help?" I asked, even though I knew the answer. "Sell the house," my father said simply. "It's worth at least $500,000. You'll be able to pay off Nora's debt and still have enough left over for a small house for you somewhere in the suburbs." I laughed. I couldn't help it. It was so absurd, so predictable, that the laughter came out involuntarily. "Are you serious?" I finally asked, wiping away the tears of laughter. "You cut me off from my family when I refused to give my savings for my studies, and now you come and ask me to sell my house to save Nora again?" "It's not just a house," my mother said with a hint of irritation. "It's the Winthrop family legacy. The legacy that Aunt Eleanor left to me, not you," I reminded her. "And the answer is no. I'm not selling the house." "Laurel," Nora said quietly, for the first time in a while, "I know I don't deserve your help, but I'm really in trouble. I'm facing 15 years in prison." I looked at my sister, beautiful, well-groomed, used to getting everything she wanted. She didn't even look truly remorseful, just scared of the consequences. "I'm sorry, Nora," I said, and part of me really was. "But I can't give you the only thing I have." "You can always make a deal with the investigation, confess. Maybe you could get a lesser sentence." "Plea bargain?" Nora paled. "You want me to go to jail?" "And you want me to lose my house," I retorted. "That's enough," my father snapped, taking a step toward me. "You've always thought only of yourself." "Me?" My indignation was genuine. "Me, who works 2 jobs, saves lives, and never asked you for a cent. Am I selfish?" "You refuse to help your own sister," my mother interjected. "What else do you call it?" "I refuse to sacrifice myself for a person who has never thought about anyone but herself," I replied, feeling anger rising inside me. "And you both covered for her. Always." "Family helps family," my father repeated again, as if that phrase explained everything. "Really?" I looked him straight in the eye. "Where was that help when I was sick in college and couldn't pay my hospital bill? Where was that help when I was taking care of Aunt Eleanor and working 3 jobs to pay for school? Where was that help when you cut me off from my family because I refused to hand over my savings?" "You made your choice then," my mother replied coldly. "And you're making it now." "Yes, I am." I straightened up, feeling strangely confident. "And my choice is no. I will not sell the house, not to save Nora from the consequences of her own actions. You'll regret it, my father said, taking a step towards me. You have no idea what I'm capable of to protect my family. Your family? I smiled bitterly. You excluded me from it 5 years ago, remember? Come on. My father turned to his wife and Nora. There's nothing more to do here. They left without saying goodbye. Only Nora paused for a moment at the door and looked over her shoulder at me. You'll be sorry, she whispered. We'll find a way to make you. I closed the door behind them and leaned back against it, feeling my knees tremble. For 5 years I had been trying to forget them, to build a new life. And now they were back to destroy everything. For the next 2 days, I hardly thought about their visit. There was a complicated case in the hospital, a boy with a severe head injury, and I spent both days fighting for his life. When I finally returned home, tired but happy, the boy had stabilized and had a good chance of recovery. The last thing I thought about was the threats from my parents. But now, sitting among the ruins of my home, I realized that they were not throwing words to the wind. They really did it. They broke into my house and destroyed everything that was dear to me. I finished my tea and forced myself to get up. I had to clean up at least some of the mess, call the insurance company, maybe hire a security guard. But as I walked around the rooms, picking up the pieces of my belongings, my thoughts kept coming back to Aunt Eleanor and her collection. That was the real reason for my refusal. Not just love for this house or stubbornness. I couldn't sell the house because there was something much more valuable underneath than the house itself, something I had sworn to protect. I went down again to the secret basement. Luckily, my parents hadn't found it. Apparently, they hadn't even looked for it. For them, the house was just real estate to be sold. They had no idea that a real treasure was hidden under it. Turning on the light, I looked at the collection again. Bookshelves from floor to ceiling, hundreds of volumes in special protective covers. The first edition of Darwin's Origin of Species, a rare manuscript by a medieval alchemist. A signed copy of James Joyce's Ulysses. And this is only what could be seen at a glance. Aunt Eleanor collected this collection all her life. She traveled the world, attended auctions and private sales, met collectors and bibliophiles. She was offered huge sums of money for individual copies, but she never sold a single book. These books are not just paper and ink, Laurel, she said. They are the history of mankind, its knowledge, dreams, mistakes, and achievements. They cannot be divided. According to experts I secretly consulted, the total value of the collection was about $6 million, perhaps even more, given its historical value and integrity. But its true value was not in money. Aunt Eleanor willed that 10 years after her death, the collection be transferred to the National Book Museum as a single exhibit. A special hall in her name was to be created there, where researchers and visitors could familiarize themselves with these priceless publications. But first, she wrote in her will, I want Laurel Winthrop to be the guardian of this collection. She must prove herself worthy of this honor by keeping the collection safe and sound for 10 years. 5 years have already passed. I maintained perfect conditions in the basement: temperature, humidity, lighting. Every month, I took an inventory and consulted with restorers about some particularly vulnerable volumes. This duty became a part of my life. I was not just a nurse, but also a guardian of the treasure entrusted to me by my aunt. I walked over to the nearest shelf and carefully picked up one of the volumes, a first edition of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, signed by the author. Flipping through the pages, I remembered my aunt's words. Laurel, one day someone will try to force you to give up this house and collection. Maybe they will offer you money, maybe they will threaten you. But remember, you are the only one I trust. You are the only one who understands the true value of these books. Now her prophecy was coming true. My parents and sister tried to force me to sell the house. First they begged, now they threatened and destroyed it. What would come next? I carefully put the book back and walked over to the old secretary in the corner. In one of the drawers were documents related to the collection catalogs, expert opinions, a copy of the will. And something else, a contract with the law firm that represented Aunt Eleanor's interests, and now mine. According to the terms of the will, I had no right to disclose the existence of the collection until the 10-year period had expired. But circumstances changed. My parents and sister will not stop. They will find a way to take the house away, through the courts, through the bank, through blackmail. And then the collection will be in jeopardy. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number of my lawyer, an elderly, respected Mr. Howard, who had been handling Aunt Eleanor's affairs for over 30 years. I have a situation. It has to do with the collection. I told you briefly about my parents' visit, their demands, and the nighttime intrusion. They didn't find the basement, but I'm afraid they might next time, I finished. Ms. Winthrop, the lawyer said slowly, your aunt would have made provisions for something like this. There's a clause in her will that covers this. If the collection is endangered by external circumstances, you have the right to initiate an early transfer to the museum. Early transfer? I couldn't believe my ears. You mean, now? Not exactly, Mr. Howard replied. The process will take several months. We need to notify the museum, prepare documents, organize transportation. But yes, we can begin the process now, without waiting for the 10-year period to expire. And what will happen to the house? I asked, feeling my insides cramp at the thought of losing Aunt Eleanor's house. The house will remain yours, Ms. Winthrop, the lawyer assured me. But the basement will be remodeled after the collection is removed. Perhaps it's even for the best. Your relatives won't be able to harm the books if they're not here. I closed my eyes, trying to control my emotions. I had kept this secret for 5 years, tending to the collection, feeling like I was the custodian of something bigger than myself, and now I had to let it go sooner than I had planned. Okay, I finally said. Let's start the process. I want the collection to be safe. Excellent. Mr. Howard's voice sounded approving. I'll start preparing the paperwork today. And you, Ms. Winthrop, I would advise you to think about your own safety. Your relatives seem to be willing to stop at nothing. We arranged to meet the next day, and I ended the call. Standing among the priceless books Aunt Eleanor had collected, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. I had fulfilled my duty to my aunt. I had kept the collection intact. Now it was time to pass it on to the world, just as she had wanted. I looked around the shelves one last time, promising myself that I would do everything possible to ensure that the collection reached the museum unharmed. It was my last duty to the memory of Aunt Eleanor. As for my parents and sister, well, I would deal with them in my own way. It was time to show the Winthrop family that I was no longer the obedient, quiet girl they could use as they pleased. The next few days turned into a whirlwind of chaotic action. I barely slept, constantly vacillating between trying to put the house in order and obsessing over the safety of the collection. Although my parents did not find the secret basement, every creak in the old house made me shudder. Every night, I checked the door in my bedroom floor, making sure it was securely locked, and in the morning, my first move was to check the locks on the front door. The police reported back 2 days later, with no results. A family conflict, the officer said on the phone, in a tone that explained everything. We've discussed the situation with your father, and he claims it was a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? I almost screamed into the phone. They destroyed my house. Unfortunately, without witnesses and clear evidence, there's not much we can do. The officer sounded distant, like a man who had already moved on to the next case. I understood. Harrison Winthrop, owner of a chain of drugstores, sponsor of the annual charity ball, friend of the mayor. Of course, the police didn't want to mess with him. Luckily, I did get a restraining order, although I wasn't sure if it would stop my parents if they decided to return. I turned to the insurance company, but there were problems there too. Domestic vandalism by relatives fell into a gray area of the rules, and the agent hinted that the payment could be delayed for months. That Saturday, when I woke up in my bedroom with the walls still covered in offensive graffiti, I realized I couldn't live like this anymore. I needed help, but most of my friends were colleagues from the hospital, busy with their own affairs. There was only one phone number I could dial. Reed Foster answered after the second ring, as if he had been waiting for my call. We had known each other since childhood. He lived next door to Aunt Eleanor's house and often visited her with his grandfather, an old antique dealer. We played in the garden, explored the attic, read books in the library, and then we grew up and went our separate ways. Laurel? He sounded surprised but happy. I haven't heard from you in a long time. How are you? Not so good, I admitted. Reed, I need help. I briefly told him what had happened, trying not to break down in tears, but my voice was still trembling. I'll be there in 20 minutes, he said without hesitation. Exactly 20 minutes later, Reed stood on my porch, tall, strong, with the same sincere look in his brown eyes that I remembered from childhood. He hugged me without saying anything, and this simple gesture shattered my false resilience. Come in, I finally managed to say, pulling back and wiping my eyes. I'm sorry for the mess. Reed entered the house and stood looking around. Laurel, this is... He couldn't find the words. Who would do this? My family, I replied bitterly. Apparently, the Winthrops have a special way of expressing their love. Reed stepped carefully between the rubble, surveying the destruction. Tell me everything, he said, turning to me. From the beginning. We sat down on the only surviving chair in the kitchen, and I told him everything about my parents' visit, their demands to sell the house, the threats, and the invasion. It's unbelievable! Reed shook his head when I finished. I remember your father, always so reserved, so respectful. Looks can be deceiving, I sighed, especially when it comes to Nora. They'd do anything for her. Reed stood up and rolled up his sleeves. Well, enough talking. Let's get this place cleaned up. We spent the next few hours cleaning up the debris, removing damaged furniture, and sweeping up glass. Reed worked silently, efficiently, like a man used to physical labor. He tightened, repaired, and reinforced. By the evening, the living room almost looked normal. At least we could sit there without fear of getting hurt by the debris. Thank you, I said, when we finally sat down to rest, exhausted. I don't know what I would have done without you. It's nothing, Reed said. And you've always been more than just a neighbor to me. I blushed, not knowing how to respond to this insinuation. Reed seemed surprised by my frankness, too. Anyway, he quickly added, I'll be back tomorrow with tools and materials. I need to repaint the walls and fix the door, and you might want to change the locks. That would be great, I nodded. I'll pay for all the expenses, of course. We'll talk about it later. Reed stood up. But before I do, are you sure you want to stay here alone? Your parents might come back. I have a restraining order, I reminded him, and I don't want to run away from my own home. That would mean they won. Reed nodded, but his face remained concerned. At least take this. He pulled a small object out of his pocket. It's an alarm. When you press the button, it will make a sound of 120 decibels. It's enough to scare away anyone and bring all the neighbors to their feet. I took it, touched by his concern. Thank you, Reed. For everything. He left, promising to come back the next morning, and I was left alone in the semi-dark house, exhausted, but strangely calm. Perhaps for the first time in days, I felt something like hope. The next day, Reed arrived with a truck full of building materials. He was followed by his cousin David, a metalworker, who set about replacing the front door with a more secure one. A few hours later, the house turned into a construction site. The sound of hammers, the whirring of a drill, the smell of fresh paint. I helped as much as I could, but mostly just watched, amazed at how quickly my home was being restored. The walls that had been screaming with insults yesterday were now covered in a warm cream color. Broken windows were being replaced with new ones. Damaged furniture was being removed, and the ones that could be repaired were being carefully repaired. You will recover too, Reed said, catching my eye. Even stronger than before. His words touched me because they hit the nail on the head. I did feel destroyed, devastated. But seeing how my house was changing, I realized that I had a chance to start again. Not just to rebuild what was there, but to create something new and stronger. In the evening, when David left, and Reed and I were sitting on the porch with cups of tea, a black car with tinted windows pulled up to the house. Two men in dark suits got out and walked toward us. Their gait, their looks, everything screamed danger. "Ms. Winthrop?" the taller one asked, not even bothering to smile. "Laurel Winthrop?" "Yes." I stood up, feeling Reed tense up next to me. "Can I help you?" "We represent Mr. Kalinsky." The man pulled a business card out of his pocket and handed it to me. There was no name on it, just the words, Kalinsky Financial Solutions, and a phone number. "We have information that your sister, Nora Winthrop, owes our client a substantial amount of money." "That's not my problem," I replied, returning the business card. "I'm not responsible for my sister's debts." "Mr. Kalinsky thinks otherwise," the second man interjected. "He's heard that you have resources to help your sister. This house, for example." "My house is not for sale." I tried to sound firm, but my voice betrayed me, trembling on the last word. "Everything is for sale, Ms. Winthrop," the taller man smiled. "It's just a matter of price. And believe me, it's better to make a deal with us now than to wait until things get heated." "Hey!" Reed stepped forward, blocking me. "Are you threatening her?" "We're just having a business conversation," the man replied, looking Reed up and down. "Stay out of family matters, Mr. Foster." Reed cut him off. "And I believe this conversation is over. Ms. Winthrop has made herself clear. The house is not for sale." The men looked at each other. "We'll be back," the taller one said, looking at me over Reed's shoulder. "And the debt has to be paid, one way or another." They walked to their car and drove away, leaving me shaking with fear and anger. "Who is this Kalinsky?" Reed asked as the car disappeared around a corner. "I have no idea," I admitted, "but apparently he's one of Nora's creditors." "We should call the police." Reed pulled out his phone. "That's a clear threat." "I don't think that's going to help," I sighed. "The police have already shown how serious they are about my situation." "Then your lawyer," Reed insisted. I nodded, thinking about Mr. Howard and our plans for the collection. Now that my parents and sister had been added to the list of creditors, the need to secure the books as quickly as possible was even more urgent. The next morning, I met with Mr. Howard in his office, an old-fashioned wood-paneled room that smelled of paper. I told him about the visit of Kalinsky's men. "That makes it worse," the lawyer said thoughtfully, tapping his fingers on the desk. "If your sister's creditors find out about the collection, they might try to seize it as a potential asset of the Winthrop family." "But that's impossible, isn't it?" I asked worriedly. "The collection belongs to me, not the family." "Legally, yes," Mr. Howard nodded. "And while they are going on, the collection will be in jeopardy." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out onto the street. "I've contacted the National Book Museum," he said at last. "They are thrilled to have the collection, even earlier than planned." "But there is a condition." "What is it?" I tensed. "They want a public ceremony," Mr. Howard turned to me. "A press conference, an official transfer of the collection. It will be the main event of the year for the museum, and they want maximum publicity." "Publicity?" I shook my head. "It means that everyone will know about the collection." "My parents, Nora, the creditors?" "Exactly," the lawyer nodded. "But think about it. If the collection is officially transferred to the museum in front of journalists and the public, no one can take it away. It will be protected not only legally, but also by public attention." I thought about it. Part of me was terrified at the thought of publicity. I had always been the quiet, inconspicuous Laurel who tried not to attract attention. But another part of me, the part that had grown up in recent days, understood Mr. Howard's logic. "When?" I finally asked. "In 3 weeks," the lawyer replied. "The museum needs time to prepare. In the meantime, we'll be increasing security at your home. I have already arranged for an alarm system to be installed and a private security guard to be hired. Leaving the lawyer's office, I felt strangely elated. A week ago, I was scared, confused, ready to give up. But now, as I walked to the bus stop, I could feel the determination building inside me. My parents and sister tried to break me. Creditors threatened and intimidated me, but they didn't know who they were dealing with. I was not just Laurel Winthrop, a quiet nurse. I was the guardian of Aunt Eleanor's treasure, and I wasn't going to back down. When I returned home, I found Reed painting the wall in the living room. He turned around when he heard me coming, and I saw a smile light up his face. "How did the meeting with the lawyer go?" he asked, putting down his brush. "Good," I replied, feeling strangely elated. "Reed, there's something I need to tell you." Something I've never told anyone. I led him to the bedroom, threw back the carpet, and opened the secret door. "What is it?" he asked when I turned on the staircase light. "Aunt Eleanor's inheritance," I answered, "and the reason why I will never sell this house." We went down the stairs, and I turned on the basement light. Reed froze in place, amazed at the sight. Endless shelves of books, manuscripts, rare editions. "Oh my God," he whispered. This is incredible." I told him about the collection, about Aunt Eleanor's will, about my plans to donate it to the museum. "Now you understand why I fought so hard to protect this house," I finished. "It's about the promise I made to Aunt Eleanor." Reed gently touched the spine of the nearest book. "This explains a lot of things," he said quietly. "And now I understand why you're so special, Laurel. Aunt Eleanor was right to choose you." His words touched me to the core. In the 5 years since I became the curator of the collection, no one has known about my secret. I could not tell anyone about the burden of responsibility I carried. And now, as Reed stood next to me, looking at me with understanding and admiration, I felt some of that burden lifted from my shoulders. 3 weeks, I told him. In 3 weeks, the official ceremony for the transfer of the collection to the museum will take place. A public ceremony. The whole world will know about it. "And your family, too," Reed said. "Yes," I nodded. "And they will realize that I am not the weak, quiet Laurel they knew. I'm not going to let them run my life anymore." We went back upstairs, and I locked the door. Reed helped me put the carpet back in place, and then suddenly took my hand. "I'm with you," he said simply. "No matter what happens, I'll help you protect Aunt Eleanor's legacy." I squeezed his hand, feeling something new emerge between us. Not just friendship, but a deeper connection based on trust and a shared secret. "Thank you," I whispered, "for everything." The next few days turned into a frenzy of preparation. I worked at the hospital during the day and helped Reed restore the house in the evening. Representatives of the museum came to evaluate the collection and develop a plan for its transportation. Mr. Howard was preparing documents and press releases. A security guard appeared at the house, an inconspicuous but reliable man who watched over the house in my absence. An alarm system was installed. My parents did not appear anymore, but I felt their presence. In the disturbing calls that I did not answer, in the letters that I returned unopened. Kalinsky's men did not return either, but sometimes I would notice a black car with tinted windows driving slowly down the street. Every day brought me closer to the ceremony, and I felt my inner strength growing. The walls of my house, which had recently been painted with images, now shone with fresh paint. Broken windows were replaced with new, stronger ones. The doors were now equipped with secure locks, and I was changing in the same way. The frightened woman, who had been crying among the ruins of her home, was turning into a person who was ready to fight for her future. I was no longer a victim. I became a protector, a guardian, a warrior. One evening, as Reed and I sat on the rebuilt porch watching the sunset, I suddenly realized that for the first time in years, I felt truly alive. "You know," I told him, "I never thought I'd say this, but I'm almost grateful to my family." If it weren't for their intrusion, I would never have taken this step to reveal the secret of the collection, to show it to the world. And we wouldn't have been reunited, Reed added, gently touching my hand. I looked at him, at his open, honest face, his eyes full of sincerity. And I realized that I had found something more than just help with repairs. I found a person I could trust, a person who saw the real me, not just the quiet Laurel, but a strong woman worthy of Aunt Eleanor's trust. 2 weeks, I said, coming back to reality. In 2 weeks, the collection will be safe, and the world will know about Aunt Eleanor's true legacy. And about the real Laurel Winthrop, Reed added, squeezing my hand. I knew that there were still many challenges ahead. I knew that my parents and Nora would not give up easily, that Kalinsky and other creditors would look for a way to get to the collection. But for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of them. My walls had been torn down and rebuilt stronger than before. And so was I. The day of the ceremony was sunny and cool. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, smoothing out the folds of the navy blue dress I had bought for the occasion. My reflection seemed unfamiliar to me. The woman looking back at me had a confident look and a straight posture, not the anxious Laurel I had been just a few weeks ago. Reed was waiting for me downstairs. When I walked down the stairs, he met me with an admiring look. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "I'm nervous," I admitted, fixing my hair. "I've never been good at public events." "It'll be okay." Reed squeezed my hand. "And I'll be there for you." We left the house together. We were met on the porch by an elderly security guard, Mr. Jameson, who walked us to the car. He had been accompanying us for the past 2 weeks, unobtrusive but always on the lookout. Thanks to him, I could finally sleep peacefully, not flinching at every rustle. On the way to the National Museum of Books, I looked at the city passing outside the window. Did these passers-by, drivers, cyclists, realize how important today was for me? For world culture? Today, Aunt Eleanor's collection will finally come out of the shadows and become the property of humanity. The museum met us with a crowd of people. The press, representatives of cultural institutions, bibliophiles, invited guests. An improvised stage with microphones and a banner announcing the solemn transfer of the Eleanor Winthrop collection was set up under the wide staircase. I could barely contain my smile, imagining how surprised my parents would be when they saw it. They still didn't know the true value of Aunt Eleanor's house. They didn't know that by forcing me to sell the house, they were trying to force me to betray my aunt's last will. The museum's director, Dr. Marshall, met us at the entrance, a tall, thin man with gray hair and kind eyes behind glasses. "Ms. Winthrop," he shook my hand enthusiastically, "I can't tell you how grateful we are for this invaluable gift. Your aunt's collection is a real treasure that will enrich our institution and enable scholars from all over the world to study." I listened to his grateful speeches, nodded and smiled, but kept looking out of the corner of my eye at the crowd. Would they come? Mr. Howard did everything he could to get the word out about the ceremony in the local newspapers and on television. Invitations were sent to all the famous families in town, including the Winthrops. And so, when the director was leading us to the stage, I saw them. Father, Mother, and Nora were standing at the edge of the crowd, their faces expressing a mixture of surprise and suspicion. They obviously didn't understand what was going on, but their natural inclination to be present at important social events won out. I pretended not to notice them and concentrated on the words of Dr. Marshall, who was starting the ceremony. "Dear friends," his voice came over the speakers, "today is a special day for our museum and for the entire literary community. We are accepting a gift of inestimable value, a collection of rare books and manuscripts collected by the late Eleanor Winthrop during her long and fruitful life." The crowd applauded. I could see my father leaning over to my mother, whispering something in her ear. Their faces were filled with wonder. "Eleanor Winthrop," the director continued, "was a distinguished botanist, paleontologist, and bibliophile. During her numerous expeditions around the world, she gathered a unique collection of literary and scientific rarities. According to her will, after her death, the collection was kept secret for 10 years, under the supervision of her niece, Laurel Winthrop. More applause. I could see my father's face flush with anger, and Nora's eyes open wide, as if she couldn't believe her ears. Now, under special circumstances, Laurel Winthrop has decided to donate the collection to the museum ahead of schedule, and we are extremely grateful to her for this decision. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Laurel Winthrop. I went up on stage to the applause of the audience. My knees were shaking, but I forced myself to straighten up and smile. "Thank you, Dr. Marshall," I began, trying to make my voice sound confident. "I am honored to carry out my Aunt Eleanor Winthrop's last wishes and to transfer her collection to the National Book Museum." I spoke about my aunt, about her love of knowledge and art, about her desire to make her collection accessible to everyone. And then, I moved on to the topic that made me want to speed up the transfer. "The last few weeks have been difficult for me," I said, looking directly at my parents, who were standing in the crowd with tense faces. "Some people have tried to force me to sell Aunt Eleanor's house, unaware of the real treasure it holds. Some even resorted to vandalism and threats. There were whispers in the crowd. But I remained faithful to the promise I made to my aunt," I continued. "Even in the face of family pressure and threats, I did not betray her trust." The museum director, sensing the tension building, hastened to intervene. "Ms. Winthrop, let me once again express our deepest gratitude for your gift. The Eleanor Winthrop collection will be housed in a specially equipped room named after her, where researchers and visitors will be able to study these invaluable materials." I gave him the microphone, but I had no regrets about what I had said. Let everyone know what I had to go through to preserve this collection. After the official part, the reception began. The guests walked the halls of the museum, looking at the exhibits from Aunt Eleanor's collection, the most valuable and rare pieces that the museum was in a hurry to show to the public. I stood there with a glass of champagne, accepting congratulations and compliments from people who suddenly remembered that they knew me or Aunt Eleanor. Reed did not leave my side, and his presence gave me strength. And then I saw my parents approaching me. Their faces were masks of politeness, but their eyes betrayed their true feelings: anger, resentment, envy. "Laurel," my mother said, smiling tightly. "This is unexpected." "Really?" I remained calm. "I thought you had received an invitation." "We did," my father confirmed, barely containing his irritation. "But we didn't expect this." "Is this the treasure you've been hiding?" my mother asked. "A bunch of old books?" "A collection worth $6 million, I answered calmly. "Perhaps even more, given its integrity and the rarity of some of the items." I saw their eyes widen with surprise and greed. "$6 million?" my mother whispered. "And you're just giving it away?" "I'm carrying out Aunt Eleanor's will," I corrected. "She wanted these books to be available to everyone, not locked away or sold off individually." "You could sell them." My father didn't hide his indignation. "Help your sister. Family helps family, remember?" "We're not a family anymore," I answered quietly but firmly. "You decided that 5 years ago, and you confirmed your decision when you broke into my house and destroyed everything." "We didn't," my father began, but I interrupted him. "I have proof: your cufflink, Nora's earring, and witnesses. The neighbors saw your car that night." I felt Reed squeeze my hand in support. "You don't understand what we've gone through because of you," my mother hissed. "You've ruined our reputation with your selfishness." "I've filed a police report," I said, ignoring her words, "and I'm going to testify against Nora in the credit fraud case." "You wouldn't dare!" My father's face twisted with anger. "I dare." I met his gaze without fear. "And one more thing. Those people who came to me from Kolinsky, I passed on information about them to the FBI. It seems that this Kolinsky has been on their wanted list for a long time. Nora's gotten herself into more trouble than you think. I saw them go pale. Their reputations were above all else, and now they were in real danger, not because of my actions, but because of their own. You're going to regret this, my father said. No, I won't. I shook my head. I'm finally free of you. From your control, from your emotional blackmail, from your fake love that appears only when you need something. The museum director approached us, sensing the tension. Everything okay, Ms. Winthrop? He asked, looking at my parents suspiciously. Everything is fine, Dr. Marshall, I assured him. My parents are leaving now. We're not done yet, my mother hissed. Oh, we're done! I looked her straight in the eye. They left, throwing me glances full of anger and resentment. But I was no longer afraid of them. For the first time in my life, I felt truly free. Nora never came to me. I saw her at the exit when my parents were leaving the museum in a hurry. She looked back only once, and in her eyes I saw something like envy. Not regret, not remorse, just envy of the attention I was getting. Are you okay? Reed asked when we were alone. Yes. I was surprised to realize it was true. For the first time in years, I'm really okay. The rest of the ceremony was a blur. I signed official documents on the transfer of the collection, shook many hands, answered questions from journalists, and all the while, I felt a strange elation, as if I had finally thrown off the heavy burden I had been carrying all my life. When Reed and I finally left the museum, it was already evening. We walked slowly through the park, enjoying the silence after a noisy day. What are you thinking about? Reed asked as we sat down on a bench by the fountain. About Aunt Eleanor, I confessed. I wonder what she would say if she could see this. She would be proud of you, Reed replied confidently. You protected her legacy, even when it wasn't easy. You know, I stared at the water shimmering in the fountain. When I was little, Aunt Eleanor used to tell me that true family isn't always those who share your blood. Sometimes they are those who share your values, your dreams, your vision of the world. Reed took my hand, and I felt warmth spread through my body. I've always admired you, Laurel, he said quietly, ever since I was a little girl. Your kindness, your strength, the strength you didn't even realize you had. Your ability to see beauty where others see only pages. Were you in love with me? I asked him directly. I was, he smiled, and I still am. And probably always will be. I didn't know what to say. These weeks spent together had changed both me and my feelings for him. I'm not asking for an answer right now, Reed added, as if reading my mind. Just know that I'm here for you, and I always will be if you let me. I squeezed his hand, feeling something warm spread through my chest. Not love, not yet. Thank you, I whispered, for everything. We returned to my house, restored, but still with traces of recent events. The windows were new, the doors stronger, the walls freshly painted. But something had subtly changed. It was as if the house had exhaled, relieved of the burden of the secret it had kept for so many years. What are you going to do with this place now? Reed asked as we sat on the porch watching the sunset. I don't know, I admitted. The basement is empty now. Most of the rooms need to be renovated, but I don't want to sell it. It's all that's left of Aunt Eleanor. What if... Reed hesitated, then continued. What if we turned it into something new? Something that would preserve the memory of your aunt and her love of knowledge. What do you have in mind? A cultural center, he met my eyes. A small, intimate space for literary evenings, readings, lectures. A place where people could join the same world your aunt loved. I thought the idea was great. Not a museum. There are plenty of them in the city. It was a living, cozy space where knowledge and art are not kept under glass, but exist in constant motion, in the exchange of ideas. The Eleanor Winthrop Cultural Center, I said, trying to hear how it sounded. I like it. I could help with the renovations, Reed offered. And my grandfather knew a lot of writers and collectors. I'm sure they would love to support such a project. We talked late into the night, exchanging ideas, dreams, and plans. And every minute, I felt my heart fill with something new, not just hope, but confidence. Confidence that the future could be bright, even if the past was difficult. The next morning, I woke up to a call from Mr. Howard. He said that Nora had been detained. The FBI was really interested in her connections to Kolinsky, who turned out to be a known fraudster and money launderer. Her parents had tried to use their connections to protect her, but this time the scale of the problem was too big. I felt a strange relief, not joy at someone else's misfortune, but relief at the realization that justice does exist, that actions have consequences, even if you are the favorite daughter of powerful parents. A week later, the local newspaper published a large article about Aunt Eleanor's collection and how I had protected it from ill-wishers. The author was careful not to name names, but for those who knew the situation, everything was clear. My parents' reputation, which they had so carefully built, was shaken. Not catastrophically, but enough to make them taste the social isolation they had created for me 5 years earlier. Reed and I started working on transforming the house. The basement, where the collection was once stored, became a space for literary evenings and intimate meetings. In the living room, we set up a library with books I bought in secondhand stores. Not as valuable as Aunt Eleanor's collection, but interesting enough to attract literature lovers. Gradually, the house was filled with new life. People came, first a few interesting people, then more. We held poetry readings, book presentations, and lectures on the history of literature. And every time I talked about Aunt Eleanor, about her love of knowledge and art, about her desire to share this love with others, Reed was there to support, help, and advise me. Our relationship developed slowly, without haste. We both realized that there was no hurry. We had our whole lives ahead of us. One evening, when the last visitors had left after a lecture on early editions of Shakespeare, we sat on the porch, as we often did. The autumn air was cool, and Reed threw his jacket around my shoulders. "You know," he said, looking up at the stars, "your Aunt Eleanor was right. Family is not always about blood. Sometimes it's those who see the real you and love you for who you are." I nodded, feeling something warm spread through my chest. "I found my true family," I said quietly. "You, this house, the people who come here to share their love of books and knowledge." "What about your parents and Nora?" Reed asked cautiously. I thought about it. Nora was still under investigation, and my parents were trying to use all their connections to help her. They hadn't contacted me since we met at the museum. "I don't know," I admitted. "Maybe someday, but not now. Now I want to build my life without looking back." Reed put his arms around me, and we sat there for a long time, listening to the crickets and the breathing of the evening city. Aunt Eleanor's house, once a hiding place for priceless books, was now the foundation for a new life, my life, which I was building on my own terms. I finally understood what Aunt Eleanor meant when she said that the true value is not in what you have, but in what you save for others. Her collection was now safe, available to anyone who appreciated knowledge and beauty. And I found my way, my purpose, my place in the world. Sometimes, walking through the corridors of the house, I could feel Aunt Eleanor's presence, not as a ghost, but as a quiet approval, as invisible support. She always believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. And now I was doing everything I could to justify that faith. Family is not always those who share your blood. Sometimes they are those who see something special in you, something worthy of trust and love. Aunt Eleanor saw that in me. Reed saw it in me. And now, finally, I saw it in myself. My home, once destroyed by anger and greed, has now become a symbol of rebirth and a new beginning. A solid foundation on which I could build my future, without fear, without doubt, with faith in my own strength. And this was Aunt Eleanor's most valuable legacy, not the books, not the house, but the confidence that I deserved better, that I could be strong, that I could create my own family of people who respect my boundaries and share my values. This was true freedom,